What's up, everybody? Welcome into another TFA video. My name is Robby Jeffries, and today I am pumped up to start off our 2021 Monday mock draft video series. Basically, we're going to be coming out with a new video every single Monday for you all. It's going to show you different strategies that you can employ in your drafts that are coming up here in the fall and help you win a fantasy championship. Today, I'm going over the zero wide receiver draft strategy. And a disclaimer before I get into that is that you should never go into a draft saying, I'm going to stick to one specific strategy, right? Boards change, players get taken earlier or later. You never know exactly what's going to happen. So even though that's what we are doing today and in these Monday series, basically these are just going to show you what your team can look like, how you can maybe fade a certain position more or less, and your team can still show that it has talent at the end of the draft. So make sure you just always adjust to the board that's given to you and take value when presented. So what is the zero wide receiver draft strategy? Basically, it's avoiding wide receiver for the first 4, sometimes 5 rounds before you take your first wide receiver. And why you would employ this is basically if you have your positional advantage at 3 positions and you're weaker at 1, that being wide receiver, you can really set your team up to have a huge advantage over your opponents in most given weeks. So we are doing this mock on Fantasy Pros. They have a really good mock simulator to help you prepare for your 2021 drafts. I'm going to be doing a 12-team half PPR draft. The starting roster will be a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flexes, defense, and kicker. So that's probably your most common league settings in today's fantasy football. And I will be drafting right smack dab in the middle at the 106. So let's get this started. Okay, so we are starting at the 106 spot. And as you'll know, and when you do some of these mocks, is that running backs are going to be king for about the first 7 or 8 picks. And that's no different in this draft either. Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Derrick Henry, Saquon, and Zeke are the first 5 off the board. And so that leaves us sitting here at the 106 with Alvin Kamara, Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Aaron Jones as some of the top options. And I think this is a slam dunk pick for Alvin Kamara. Now, he might not be here for you in some of your drafts if you're picking up the 106, but I would be equally fine with taking a Jonathan Taylor, a Zeke Elliott, any of these star running backs that can catch passes and get you, a good baseline, a good floor in these half PPR settings. So Alvin Kamara is going to be the clear choice here with my first overall pick. Okay, so we are up with our second pick here, and now we've seen some wide receivers start to fall off the board after our Alvin Kamara pick. Tyreek, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, and then Travis Kelce also went, as you can see there. So we have seen some running backs stay on the board a little bit, giving us some options to choose from. Honestly, I'm going to look at Patrick Mahomes here. I know normally I'm not an early second round, mid-second round type of quarterback guy, but Patrick Mahomes here does feel like a value. He's going to be a guy that goes probably late first in a lot of your drafts, early second. And in this strategy where we are trying to get a positional advantage at every position outside of wide receiver, what better person to take in our second pick than Patrick Mahomes? So I'm going to take him here with our 207 pick. Okay, going to give you guys the board again here. After we took Patrick Mahomes, no quarterbacks went off the board. A lot of running backs did, so that's not great for us. But Najee Harris, Austin Eckler, Cam Akers, DK Metcalf, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Calvin Ridley, Antonio Gibson, Justin Jefferson, Michael Thomas, and then George Kittle went off right before us. Let's look at what the board is presenting here for us at running back. We have Miles Sanders, Chris Carson, David Montgomery, Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs. And then at tight end, we have Darren Waller still sitting there. And I really like looking at Waller here. Again, we're talking about giving ourselves a positional advantage against a lot of these other teams that we'll be facing any given week. And with Patrick Mahomes, Alvin Kamara, and Darren Waller, that is definitely going to be the case here. So I'm going to take Darren Waller. Just kind of touching on some of these running backs, I don't love a ton of them here. Miles Sanders would be an option. I think he's the last one of a tier here, but there's really nobody that really jumps out as hey, I need to take this guy and lock up that running back 2 spot. So let's continue to give ourselves positional advantage here and take Darren Waller. And now is where we see a lot of these wide receivers start to fall off the board. 9 of these next 12 picks ended up being wide receivers. The only running backs that came off were Miles Sanders and David Montgomery, and then Josh Allen was also tossed in there. So, we do have our pick at most of those same running backs outside of Sanders and Montgomery. Chris Carson is there, and he's a guy that, if you're looking at just a solid guy that's always underrated, that is Chris Carson. He's going to get most of that work in the backfield. as much as we want to say let Russ cook, they don't always do that in Seattle. And Chris Carson, when healthy, is just a guaranteed running back one most weeks. So I'm going to roll with Chris Carson here. And we are set at quarterback. We are set at tight end. And we are not taking a peek at wide receiver for a couple more rounds. So we're going to lock in Chris Carson here. So we are at round 5. This is where I want to pause for a second and just kind of give you the layout of some of these other teams here that we can stack up against ours. So we have Patrick Mahomes, Alvin Kamara, Chris Carson, and Darren Waller. If we look at some of these other squads, Christian McCaffrey, CEH, Calvin Ridley, Kenny Galladay, Josh Jacobs. So this is a team, I believe they had the first overall pick. And obviously their running backs are great. Their wide receivers are very good as well. But waiting on quarterback, waiting on tight end, we're definitely going to have the positional advantage over them every single week. The next team, it's the same thing, right? They're taking running back, wide receiver, and they got their flex. They have not taken quarterback or tight end, so we're going to have positional advantage. You can start to see that, the positional advantage is going to be something that we're going to be really excited about in most weeks. But now it's time to start looking at, should we take a wide receiver? Does it still make sense to take another running back here? Running backs, we have Myles Gaskin, Kareem Hunt, Mike Davis, Chase Edmonds, Javonte Williams, and Melvin Gordon. And then at wide receiver, we're looking at Brandon Ayuk, OBJ, T. Higgins, Juju, and DJ Chark and Chase Claypool. I'm thinking that I might dip my toe into the wide receiver waters here. I do like Brandon Ayuk. I'm just a little worried about what that offense looks like with Debo and Kittle back. Brandon Ayuk actually, his receiving totals when both Kittle and Debo were in the starting roster were 18, 44, 12, and then he went off for 115 yards. But in those 4 games, 3 of the 4 games, he was 45 yards or less, with 2 of them being pretty putrid outputs. So I'm actually going to look more to OBJ. And this is a guy that he was consistently overrated in previous years, and he would always get injured. But I think this is a great value for OBJ right now. If we're going to be hammering a lot of high upside wide receivers, OBJ is definitely one of them. He can definitely win you some weeks. So I'm going to take him here as our first wide receiver. And we see a lot of running backs actually went here. Myles Gaskin, Kareem Hunt, Mike Davis, Chase Edmonds, James Robinson, Melvin Gordon, a couple of quarterbacks, but we still have a lot of wide receivers for us. And this can be, a potential benefit to doing the 0 wide receiver strategy, is because as these people are loading up on wide receivers in those rounds 2 through 4 or 5, you already are laying the foundation for your tight end, for your quarterback. And as they're letting these other wide receivers fall, you can find a lot of value here in these middle rounds at wide receiver. So at running back, we have Raheem Mostert, Javonte Williams, David Johnson, Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, Damian Harris. I'm probably going to wait on running back. No one's jumping out to me. We have 2 studs right now. I'm not really worried about getting a third locked up quite yet, especially because we're in the middle of the draft. You don't have to go a super long time between your picks. We're only talking about 12 picks in between every single round that you are going to be picking. So now we're looking at DJ Chark, Juju, Will Fuller, Judy. And I really like DJ Chark here at the top. He was able to produce with mediocre to poor quarterback play in his past, but now he has Trevor Lawrence coming in. We saw what Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow were able to do for their wide receivers in their rookie season. I think Trevor Lawrence is right on that same par, and his number 1 guy is going to be DJ Chark. So I love locking him in as our wide receiver too. And that's the thing to remember. As we fade wide receiver early, it's good to load up on high upside wide receivers as we go forward. You're not looking at the safe guy that's just going to get you 5 for 60, 5 for 70. We're looking at guys that can have multiple touchdown weeks, who can be tied to a good quarterback in a high explosive offense. So that's something that we're looking for here. Now we are in the 7th round. Again, our roster is Mahomes, Kamara, Carson, OBJ, Chark, and Darren Waller. So we're really liking this starting lineup. And looking at running back here, we have Raheem Mostert, Ronald Jones, David Johnson, James Conner, and Damian Harris with Leonard Fournette down there. I am going to go back to the wide receiver well one more time here. And the name that's really sticking out to me here is Will Fuller. Juju Smith-Schuster is also on the board, Jerry Jeudy, Devonta Smith, Brandon Cooks. But we talk about high upside risk reward players. Will Fuller is that boom bust guy, right? We always saw him with Deshaun Watson go off for multiple touchdowns, 100-yard games. He would have his quiet weeks as well, but in good matchups, I think he can absolutely be that guy. He's tied to a different quarterback now with Tua Tagovailoa, but I do think Tua does take a step here in year 2 as the full-time starter with a full offseason for him to get prepped. So Will Fuller is going to be that guy that I'm going to take here in the 7th round. And now I've really kind of almost fixed that weakness, right, of wide receiver, where now we have high upside guys that we can plug and play every week and hopefully compete at the wide receiver position, while we're also having a huge statistical advantage every single week with Mahomes, with Darren Waller, with Alvin Kamara. I really like how this lineup is shaping out so far. So here we go with round 8. We are looking to try and just find a lot of value here and fill out the flex spots of our roster. So we can go either running back or wide receiver. At running back, we have Raheem Mostert, David Johnson, James Conner, Leonard Fournette, Michael Carter. And then at wide receiver, we have Brandon Cooks, Devonta Smith, Devontae Parker, Corey Davis, Marquise Brown, Michael Pittman Jr. So I like some of those wide receivers farther down. I think they will make it back to us. So I'm actually going to look at a running back here and try and find somebody who can give us, just a good flex if we did have an injury to either Kamara or Carson. And I think that guy's Leonard Fournette. I think there's a lot of different backs in that Tampa Bay backfield with Ronald Jones, with Gio Bernard coming over, with Keyshawn Vaughn down there somewhere on the depth chart. But Leonard Fournette proved to be kind of the guy that Bruce Arians trusts the most. And so I'm going to take Leonard Fournette here as just a guy that gives some stability if we do have injuries to one of our stud running backs here, and see how the board falls to us as we come back. Okay, wide receivers. We have left for us Laviska Shenault, Michael Gallup, Jalen Waddle, Michael Pittman. And Michael Pittman was the guy I was kind of eyeing here. He's going to be the wide receiver one in that offense for Carson Wentz and Frank Reich. Hilton is older. He popped off at the end of the season and had some really nice games, but I think Michael Pittman is going to be that alpha this year. I really think he takes a step forward and could be a really good guy to add to our wide receivers here as we're looking for high upside guys. I think he is that alpha in that Colts offense. And although they are going to be run first, I do think there's a lot of good weeks that Michael Pittman can give you as a bench player. And we are in the 10th round now. So here's where you're just looking for absolute upside at all of your positions. I would note that I'm not looking to take another quarterback or a tight end now that we've locked up Mahomes and Waller. So I'm probably just going to fill this out with running backs and wide receivers the rest of the way. You are never going to start somebody else over Mahomes ever unless he's injured or his week 12 bye week. Same thing with Waller with his week 8 bye week. So we don't need to worry about having a second guy until week 8 at the earliest, assuming there's no injuries. So a guy that's really sticking out to me here is Michael Carter here in the 10th. That is just crazy good value for a guy that could work into the starting lineup really quickly, at least split carries early for that Jets offense. So I'm going to take Michael Carter here and continue to build depth at running back. With him on the board, we now have a roster of Mahomes, Kamara, Carson, OBJ, Chark, Waller, Will Fuller, and Leonard Fournette as our starting roster there, with Pittman and Michael Carter as two really good backups there. And now if we look, now the board starts to thin out a little bit. We are in those later rounds. We have Cole Beasley, Jamison Crowder, Darnell Mooney, Nelson Aguilar, Rashad Bateman, Mecole Hardman. And then at running back, Tariq Cohen, Alexander Madison, Tevin Coleman, J.D. McKissick, James White, Marlon Mack, Savon Ahmed. I'm going to go Alexander Madison here. And the reason why is Dalvin Cook had an amazing year last year, but he's never played 16 games. He is always injured for a little bit. And at times we've seen him be out for multiple weeks. And Alexander Madison has always been that guy that steps up into that starting role and always giving you some really solid weeks when the starter. So I'm going to take a high upside backup here in Alexander Madison and really just continue to hammer running back. If there's a position I'm looking to hammer, it is running back. These guys can be really good trade assets for you later in the season. If you do get extra starters, you can trade for other positions. You need a good wide receiver. Good wide receivers are easy to attain. So make sure that you are looking at the running back position and not neglecting that upside later in these drafts. All right, we saw our first defense come off the board there in the end of the 11th round. So I haven't said it yet, but for your defense and your kicker, if you need it said to you, wait until your last 2 picks for these positions. Your defense, you can likely stream for most of the year. There are going to be people that reach for this Pittsburgh Steelers, the San Francisco 49ers, but you're always going to be able to find a defense that scores on par with those guys in any given week if you're streaming the position. And then kickers, it really just doesn't make a difference. You can find good kickers that are going to go off any given week. It's really just a last round pick type of deal with the kickers. So looking at some of these running backs left, we have Marlon Mack, Jeff Wilson, Kenneth Gainwell, Savon Ahmed, Terrell Williams, Mark Ingram, Sony Michel also down there as well. And at wide receiver, Nelson Aguilar, John Brown, Mecole Hardman, Rashad Bateman, Henry Ruggs, Christian Kirk, Paris Campbell, Denzel Mims down there. I do like Denzel Mims. I think he'll be there in another round here. So let's look at some of these guys higher up. Nelson Aguilar on that New England offense. That's a lower producing passing offense. I do think Cam will be better this year, but I think I might go John Brown here with the Las Vegas Raiders. I mean, we saw what Nelson Aguilar, funny enough, was able to do with Derek Carr and have some really good weeks. So I'm going to go with John Brown here as our pick here in the 12th round. Looking at the draft board here, you see a lot of people still hammering some of these other positions. We see defense, we see some tight ends, a lot of tight ends starting to go in these later rounds as people who waited on tight ends, and then some quarterbacks still going off the board. Some teams haven't even taken their starting quarterback. So while they're all taking those positions, they're basically just pushing down wide receivers and running backs to you to get value with some of these guys. So another good reason to just hammer those two positions early is that you can really just take all the upside shots that you would like with running back and wide receiver. Running back, looking at a lot of the same names. The one name that sticks out to me is Salvon Ahmed. He's a guy that I don't think the book is written that Myles Gaskin is going to be the starter. I think Salvon Ahmed has a really good shot to work into carries, and he showed that he could be really good when given the starting role. And then at wide receiver, Mecole Hardman is a guy that I think has a lot of upside in that Chiefs offense. That would be a really good stack to do with Patrick Mahomes. There's also Russell Gage, who is now the wide receiver 2 with Julio out to Tennessee. I'm probably going to go Mecole Hardman here, which gives us one more spot to take before we hit our defense and kicker positions. Okay, running back. And Salvon Ahmed is still there. He is likely going to be my pick. Let me just take a peek at the rest of these guys. Chuba's in there as a good handcuff to Christian McCaffrey. I wouldn't mind that either. Rashad Bateman, in that Baltimore offense, I don't mind that. Darius Slayton, Rashad Perriman, Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims. Man, Denzel Mims could be a really good pick here as well. I'm going to go with Salvon Ahmed, just that running back. I always like to take these shots at running back, and if they become the starter, they can start for your team, or they can be wonderful trade assets to your other teams who are running back needy. So I'm going to go Salvon Ahmed with our last positional bench spot before we hit defense and kicker. All right, defense is here. We have a slew of guys, a slew of teams, I should say. It doesn't really matter, honestly, who you pick. I think the best thing for you to do is look at who their week 1 and 2 teams are. I do know the Denver Broncos have a decent defense. Vic Fangio leading the way there. He always is big on defense. And then they have an easier schedule to start out with. I think they have the Jaguars, Jets, and Giants are 3 of their first games. So I'm going to slide down here and take the Denver Broncos as my defense. And then we'll round this out with kicker. A lot of you, and I'm with you, have removed kicker from your starting lineups from your leagues, but in the most standard common league, you will see kicker. So we are going to just do that here. Ricardo Blankenship, perfect. Got to love those rec specs. All right, so we have finished the draft here. I'm going to read off the team real quick here and just give some final thoughts. It's Patrick Mahomes, Alvin Kamara, Chris Carson, OBJ, DJ Chark, Darren Waller, Will Fuller, Leonard Fournette. Defense is the Broncos, Ricardo Blankenship at kicker, and then our bench, Michael Pittman, Michael Carter, Alexander Madison, John Brown, Mecole Hardman, and Salvon Ahmed. So I really like how this team actually turned out. You'll see that there's just a ton of great wide receivers this 2021 draft that you're going to have for your redraft. And that's basically because we've had a great 2020 rookie class of wide receivers that has, really shown out when Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins. I'm probably forgetting a handful, right? But that followed up with a good 2021 class with Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Rashad Bateman. A lot of these guys are just making the depth of wide receiver really, really nice. So this is a really good strategy to maybe employ because of all of that depth at wide receiver, where you're able to get a stud at quarterback, get a stud at tight end, really knock out your running backs early and get good, stable running backs so you can trade later in your season as you need to make moves and improve at different positions if there's injuries or bye weeks, things like that. So that is it for our first mock draft Monday series. Hope you guys enjoyed this draft strategy video and look forward to the next one. Thanks, guys.